Hello, I'm Russ Kahn, and I'm here to talk about Edge and how to use rectangles as guides for perspective scaling. Sounds like a mouthful, but it's not real hard and it'll be obvious after I show you. So there's no guides per se in Edge, as this is a preview version and they've left a lot of stuff out. Not that there won't be guides and not that they haven't thought of that, but right now we can use rectangles with very small heights as our guides. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a couple. I'm going to set a horizontal guide. I'm going to set a vertical guide. And let's see about where I am. Ooh, I hit pretty close, didn't I? Just trying to see where my little squares are. I use these squares as lineups. Why not? With objects and with lines. So now I've got a vertical and I've got a horizontal guide. I'm going to go ahead and name this. Name my horizontal guide baseline guide. And I'm going to name my vertical guide. I'm going to lock it too. And I'm going to name my vertical guide rectangle, or rectangle 13 doesn't cut it, so I'm going to name it vertical guide. Vertical guide. And I'm going to have one more little guide here. I want to create a horizon, so I'm going to create a real thin line horizon guide here. I'm going to move it down just a little bit. If I can grab hold of it so I can see centered and have it stick up the top a little bit. So now when I say perspective scaling, what I'm talking about is I want to have some fonts go from here to the front, and I want to have it change scale as it goes, and I want to have it scale out on an angle like it would if it was going from the horizon on a plane. So you could picture, I'm going to do it with letters, you could picture cars, boats, any object going from the horizon to the foreground would want to scale like this. And it's good to use guides because we can do precision scaling. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in our cast of characters. None other than the letters for Edge. I am shift clicking to bring them all in at once. Unfortunately, they come in on top of each other, but we know where they go. And we can use our guides as guides. Now I know I just get close. And then I go ahead and really start lining them up. So I'm going to use the center line first. I'm going to try to think of the space between the D and the G as my guideline for the rest. When I get close, I use my arrow keys. I know when I don't see any space between the blue line and the black that I've got 1 pixel there. So I kind of go for that. Scoot it over, take a look, looking at that spacing. Maybe one more. And go ahead and scoot my E over to give a similar spacing, and my other E. I'm just going for approximate here because I don't have a lot of time to spend, but of course if you had more time you can measure things more exactly. You could certainly figure out the spacings and stuff like that. I'm going to put this back on the baseline here. Alright, you notice no keyframes have been created because I turned my auto keyframe off because I don't want to create any keyframes till I'm done putting things where I want them to end up. In this case, this is going to be where I want things to end up, and the guides are just guides. We can make them go away, delete them, or make them invisible at the end, but it gets us that good lineup that we're looking for. You know, when I move that line, I don't like how far these are away considering the rest of them, so I'm going to move everything over a couple, 2 or 3, make it a little tighter. Take that line away and just see how that spacing looks, because I'm looking at this spacing without the line there. It's sort of an optical illusion when you have the line. It's a little wider than the E. Move that apart a little bit now, just so I can get that same idea there. And go ahead and put that vertical guide back in. Alright, now when I have things about where I want them, I'm going to go ahead and move them. So first thing I want to do is I want to tack this. This is my end position with my E, D, G, and E. And even prior to that, I want to go ahead and label these for easy identification. There we go. Okay, everything labeled. I tried to call it E, and you have to name it something else because they can't have the same name, so we're going to call it final E. It is actually slightly different. The gradient's different in it. I actually created two E's, don't ask. This rectangle is not rectangle 14. This is horizon guideline. It may seem silly to name them now, but believe me, when you have a lot of objects, it's really worth naming them. Okay, another thing I want to do with these letters before I animate them is there's a blue line in the middle of every object. A blue line, a blue square, I should say. And that's called the origin. What we want to do is transform these origins to the bottom. And that helps when I scale things and I line things up. That if I'm lining up the origin with my guidelines, I know I'm going to get them where I want them. And you'll see what I'm talking about. I got to move this. Accidentally move that. All right, again, notice no keyframes because I haven't had the auto keyframe on. All right, so now I've got my stage the way I want it, E, D, G, E, final E. Just so you know, I can move these around. If I don't like them, I just go to modify, and I can move it forward a little bit. See, it moved it from there to there. I can move it to the front. This way, all my objects are lined up, and when they come in here in the animation palette, they'll line up in the exact same way, which is important. Okay, so I want to mark a line in the sand, so to speak. I want to snap these, E, D, G, E, here. It doesn't matter at what point, but at some point I want these all together, so I'm just going to go ahead and snap them the way I want them. I'm not going to worry about when. I'm just going to worry about how and where. And here's the where. I've already shown you the how. Let's do the where. So I'm going to click on the E, and I'm going to put a location keyframe in. I'm going to click on I'm also going to put a scale keyframe, so I'm going to scale it when I move it, and I'm going to change the location. Click on the D, put a location keyframe, and put a scale in. Click on the G, location keyframe, scale keyframe. Repeat. Location, scale. Excellent. All right. Now I've got all the keyframes I need, and now at this point I need to decide how far into the future I want this result to be. So let's go ahead and aim for 3 seconds. So this is an important technique because you're going to be moving objects, and sometimes if you want to grab more than one, this is a good technique to do it. Point outside the first one and use a box. Just drag a box down to the last one. When everything turns gold, you can just slide it all. So I slide it all to 3 seconds. Now what I'm saying is that at 3 seconds, this is going to end up like this in this animation. Click outside of it, and here is where I am now, and that's where I will be in 3 seconds. The red line is always where you are now. So I know in 3 seconds that I will be in this position because that's where my keyframes are. So now I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, well, where do I want to be at 0 seconds? At the beginning. Well, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and line these up in a perspective way along the horizon. So I'm going to start by clicking on the auto keyframe, and I'm going to click on the E, and I'm going to take this E, and I'm going to move them up here, and I'm going to scale it down to about, I don't know, 25%, let's say. It's a good number. I'll worry about lining them up later. I'm going to do the same thing with the D, put it right around there. I'm going to scale it down to 25%. I'll just type in 25. It'll go faster, and I don't have to play mouse games. And then my G. Put my G up there. Scale it. Take my E, put it up here. Just to get it approximate and scale it. Because I can line them up now. Alright. So actually I did a pretty good job of lining them up vertically. It looks like they're right about the right spacing. Horizontally, I want to try to group these pretty close together like they were, so it gives the appearance of moving from inside outward, like it would appear if it was coming from the distance to the foreground. So now, as you can see, I've got these guides. I can sort of use them, and here's my center line. I can get this right on the center line if I want. So I know that I can line these up about there, and then that gives me that spacing there. And I can look for that spacing for the E and the G, about the same, here and here. Same thing there, until I'm happy with it. And then from there, I can unclick my animation, and now when I roll, Everything should end up exactly where we pinned it and exactly where we started it. Now if you remove your guides, you've got a perspective animation that is precise. Everything's happening at the same time and going to the same place. Of course, you might not want a precise one, but if you want a precise one, use guides. It's very easy also, I'll show you really quickly, to change the perspective. This group now will go wherever I put it. This group will end up where I have these pinned marks. So what I can do is I can take my guide, still thinking about guides, and this guide now has its origin in the center. Let's go ahead and move it to the bottom. And notice I turned my animation off here because I don't really want to animate this. I just want to move it. So by moving this to the bottom, when I rotate, this is important, it'll rotate around the origin. Let's say this was a bat and I wanted to swing a bat, right? I didn't want to swing it at the center and rotate the center out on both sides. I want to rotate it around the end. So I move the origin and I can rotate it around the end. Very important. Anyway, so let's say instead of going from the center, let's say I wanted to go someplace here, way off in the corner, let's say. So, and look at this, when I scale it, it grows from the end and it keeps your origin right where it should be. So let's say way up here. So I could click on my edge, my words, my objects, and I could put it up here. Use the center circle, put it right at the top of the line, and now when I scrub, it'll come along that line. So we're still just using these lines as animation tools. Really cool, right? Go ahead and put this back if I want. Again, I would bring this back to here, and I would grab it. Oops. If you grab something you don't want to, just put her back. Grab this line, shrink it a bit, whatever, rotate it back to around the center, and grab my group of letters and put them back on the center. It's that easy. You want this to go quicker. Use the technique that I showed you at the beginning. Highlight everything. Start here, draw a square all the way in. And now, what you can do is grab it right like that and say, I want this to happen in 1 second. So click there, scrub it, it happens quicker. You want it to be longer, I think you get the idea. You can pull it over to 4 seconds. If you want it to happen later in the animation, you can move it over to a second. And now when you run the animation, it will pause for a second and then run for a second. So it's really that easy to manipulate. Use guides for accurate scaling and perspective.